Hi, I'm Shauna Richter, educator, coach, and author. And today we're going to talk about using an agile approach to create a test and learn scenario before you invest money in an initiative or a project. Now, why would we do this? Really, the big benefit is saving time and money. So we want to create a small slice in order to gather feedback and validate our ideas before we pour a whole bunch of money and time into something new. And so what does this mean? When I talk about a slice? And so my favorite example is the cake example. It's the best one I've heard. It was how it was explained to me originally when I was really learning about Agile. So if you imagine a cake, so this is my cake. So if you imagine a cake, we've got some icing, we've got the cake part, maybe something delicious in the center, and another, maybe a couple of layers. I mean, it's really quite delicious. If you give me though a whole plate of icing, I might not be so satisfied. And if I gave you just, some cake without anything else fun above it, you also might be a little dissatisfied. So how do we take a slice, an actual slice out of this cake that is complete and full, and that is far more delicious because we get to sample the whole thing. So this is the idea that we're working with here. How do we create a full and complete slice that we can use to test and learn our initiative or our project before investing a large amount of money, or even if it's just time, into something? Now, I want to make a comment. From a time perspective, the market is just moving so fast. And so that is another benefit to this. How do we launch new ideas as quickly as possible? Well, I really believe that taking this test and learn approach is the best way to do that. Okay, so where do we start? I'm going to start with an example that is perhaps not so intuitive. One where most times we don't take a test and learn approach. Typically, we will do this with technology. And so technology, it lends itself to doing things in small slices just by the nature of the design. So I'm going to go with something that's far more complex. Let's go with a brick and mortar business that we're setting up. So with this, there's a lot of investment here. We have to actually find the physical space and bring in customers. We may have staff to put in place. We have, an investment in the infrastructure within the business as far as the physical structure, as well as there could be an investment in the administrative systems to run it. So this is not a simple thing. So if we're looking at a retail investment, how do we slice this so that we could quickly test and learn to see if this is something that is going to take off? So let's say we have a certain type of jeans. So there's a certain type of jeans that we have designed, and we've had some good success as far as interest in the idea. But how do we really think that this is going to take off, but how do we really know that that's going to take off? Do we go straight to creating the brick and mortar store, which has a huge investment associated with it? Or do we, and time, or do we take a different approach where we create a situation where we can test out these jeans and see if we're actually getting the response that we are looking for in order to be able to sustain the investment in this. How might we break this down into a smaller slice? We've got the genes and we've got an idea of the target market that we want to reach. How might we reach that market on a smaller scale with limited investment? And so one of the ways we could do it is to try and find other ways to showcase this merchandise where we are not making the investment. So there's a couple of things that we could do. We could find pop-up locations. And so that might be, could be a market. It could be a space online that somebody else has that we could potentially create our own page and see if there's interest. We could find a retailer who would be willing to feature our jeans to see if it attracts the interest that we're looking for. So there's a couple of different ideas there. So that's smaller scale. It's certainly not our own store, but let's see what takes off. So now we want to design a test in order to be able to figure out whether this is going to take off. So let's figure out a test. We have our jeans. How many pairs or different options do you want to try? Perhaps a very small test would be just one. Start with one different style, and you can have a number of different sizes of the style. So we have one with many sizes. Then we're going to want to figure out who is our target. This is a big one. So we probably have a sense of the target. We want to get really crystal clear on this and figure out, really like sketch it out. Sketch out the person that you are targeting, the person that you think will most like these jeans. And so then you have to find a spot that makes sense to reach this target that is going to attract this target. And so ideally, they already are going to this location. And so what you're trying to do is get them to see your jeans inside that location. And then the big piece of this is, how are you going to measure what the success is? So what is success? Success could be purchases of the jeans. Success could be purely how many people walk over and take an interest in the jeans. So maybe we'll say traffic. And then you want to figure out what are those metrics so that you can decide whether your test has been a success. And the big thing is feedback. How are you going to be able to collect feedback? If you are in somebody else's retail location, that becomes a little trickier. It's absolutely possible to do, but it does become trickier. If you are directly talking with your potential customers one-to-one, whether or not they make a purchase, so this is the customer potentially, whether or not they make a purchase, you can have that conversation. So you can have a conversation with them to find out, what do they like? What do they not like? What should you do different? That kind of thing. And so then you can figure out what is it that is attracting your potential target to your product and whether or not they will actually make a purchase. So you have more control if you are present when the product is being sold. Otherwise, you probably are going to have to rely on dollars and the volume of sales in order to determine what whether or not you have had a successful test. After all of this is done, you need to take stock of your test and decide, how did it go and what did you learn? So what were your lessons? What were your lessons? And from there, you can decide, do I continue? And if I do continue, what does that next test look like? And the idea is that you run a series of these tests in order to refine your product, get some really good feedback so that you can iterate. And then if it makes sense, because it doesn't always make sense, if it makes sense, if you have a really strong product and you're ready to roll, you can make that investment with full confidence that you are going to be successful. So rather than doing that at the beginning and almost taking a bit of a gamble on it, if you run these tests, you can figure out what's going to work and how you can really refine this offering to make sure that it's going to be as successful as possible. If you like this video, please give me a thumbs up, leave a comment. I love to hear from you, and subscribe and stay tuned for more videos.